Can you talk for a sec?
Yeah, testing 1, 2. Yellow blueberries are wonderful on Thursdays. uh, Voice check 1, 2.
Yeah, OBS seems to be picking it up. It's just, okay, why isn't, where are you streaming to?
Where are you going? Oh, I didn't know Grim Monolith was
Okay,
banned.
it's up. There we go.
All right, all right. It's alive.
Streaming
Here,
to,
give me or post the link somewhere, and then I'll post it in the Enshoku one too, just in case anyone.
copy. I'll just put it in the, thing myself.
Okay.
There we go. Okay, so this is actually our first time doing this, everyone. Be patient. uh, so this is going to be a new thing for this channel going forward. It's most because for me, time is becoming precious and I don't really have the content. And if you've been listening since the start, Jeff is right. We've been planning this for a long time, and it's just everything fell together, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
No,
do you want to introduce yourself?
sure. Hi. So my name is Jeff Finnegan. I have been playing card games since the early 90s. I have been working on making games, playing games, all kinds of stuff, both professionally and casually.
So,
And so it's just been the right time. And now as a dad, I try to come up with some ideas for the future. So we both know card games are in kind of a interesting space now, and I hope to continue that with my son. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
I've been playing them since I was like 10 years old, collecting cards for, wow, as long as I can literally remember. Because
Right, right.
I'm old enough to remember when you'd go up to the local paper shop and get trading cards of like whatever the current cartoons were.
Yep, yep. Oh,
I got a lot of
yeah.
Marvel stuff back in the day, and I was
Yeah.
really into
I
NBA
Disney.
cards.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, I didn't pay attention
Wait,
to.
American NBA?
Yeah, yeah, we got those down here,
Okay, okay, cool.
and they sell them currently too.
Oh, really? All right. That's
Yeah,
I,
they
I
seem
was
to.
just asking a friend. Oh, good.
Yeah, it's really strange. You'd think local rugby and that would be the big card stuff here, but no, everywhere seems to sell NBA and NFL stuff. And the weirdest thing is for me, you go into Zing and EB games, and it's like those basketball and football cards, Pokemon, the Bandai games, except Battle Spirits. Battle Spirits is doing terribly, from my understanding. The boxes are worth next to nothing in the States. I don't really see the move here. I've heard it's a really good game, but uh, it
Yeah.
is what it is.
I-
And Magic's really sparse. It seems to go on clearance a lot here now.
Wow. But I have definitely heard that like, and this you can tell me if this is an exaggeration or stereotype, but like I get the vibe that there is a lot more chances to be out and about and participating in things like sports or frisbee. I've heard is popular down there, etc. But like I've never gotten a strong vibe of the game communities coming out of Australia. I know there is because I know Smash Brothers players. I know I have bought Magic from Australia, but it seems like a much more niche communities that are like sparsely located than it maybe is like. For example, my hometown is now where PCG player is located, and my upstate New York area has multiple like world famous card shops that everyone on the East Coast knows, and kind of we're the home of Legacy and a lot of other formats. So maybe not that intense of kind of those. I want to use the Japanese word otaku hobbies, but like kind of the nerdy hobbies kind of thing. Would you say is that accurate or not?
I say it a lot like how, you know how in the US, California and New York seem to be the uh, big hubs for card games?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Here, Melbourne, well, Victoria in general, is the
Mhm.
really big hub. Queensland used to be, but I'm not sure if it is now. New South Wales, which is where I live, has always been a bit flighty, I guess. Some things will hit off, things will die rather rapidly. It's just like the card game place closest to me, right? It's a place called the Games Cube.
Mhm.
Store owner, really big magic guy,
Okay.
does a lot of magic. Someone saying they have to go to bed in the comments. I'm just acknowledging them. I'm acknowledging
Okay.
you. Yeah, he's a really big magic guy. Loves magic. The store's always been known for magic. They've tried to fire off Pokemon. Pokemon's always been, depending on the era, how much people actually enjoy playing the
Uh,
game. It's always been
yeah.
more collectible, and that's true for the globe, really. But Dragon Ball Super and Flesh and Blood seem to be the things that pop off a lot there. Then you go to different
Mhm.
stores, and it's other things, depending on the demographics of the people the store brings in. Collectible, and that's
Did I lose you? Hold on. Might cut out. Testing. One, two.
yep,
Okay. Okay. I got you again.
yeah,
Sorry.
yeah. Depending on the store and the region and the type of people that patron the store, you'll find different games go off. But typically, it's at least around my place, it's more magic focused, which
Okay. That's
again lines up with that oddity that magic doesn't really go that well in the traditional stores. It's Pokemon and the Bandai games, but I think that's more lining up with who the people are actually buying the games. I think because of the IPs Bandai has and Pokemon being Pokemon, the type of person that's going to walk into Zing Sashimi Games or go buy cards at Big W, Coles. Coles is a food supermarket. It's not like the Coles over in the States. It's
yeah.
spelt differently too. Ours
Oh.
is
Oh, really? So it's not a clothing shop?
no. It's a Coles, and it's a food shop.
Okay.
But they
Okay. Okay.
sell cards as a
Kind
shut
of
'em up
side
thing at
thing.
the front.
Yeah. Kind of. Yep.
Yeah,
Well, I just.
yeah. I
Go
used
ahead.
to buy starter decks for some games there back in the day. Used to be able to get some good stuff there once because our local paper shops also sold cards, and that was
Okay.
most of the time where you got them.
So that was like where, and this is like the '90s, right? Like you go in and
Yeah, this is
that
the
would be
late '90s or 2000s. Yeah,
okay. Okay.
card
Like
stores
I.
as a main thing didn't really hit off for the, well, I should say gaming stores didn't really start to be a major thing till much later. They existed, but it was more niche.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
place I used to go to shut down a few years back. It was basically the main hub here for a very long time. It was called the Sydney Game Centre for quite some time before was sold to Good Games, who's apparently now gone into the States. So enjoy them taking over all your independent stores because that's what they did here.
I mean, that's what seems like TCG Player is kind of absorbing a lot of that. They're now competing. Them and the university are the two largest employers in my town now. Well, town, city, but like it's kind of hilarious that our town has always been known as kind of one of the cities that had a lot of Magic players and just a lot of card game players in general.
Yeah,
But
UFS has basically been kept alive by a store over there.
yeah, it just like it has expanded now, and I saw they're worth like almost 200 million or something like that. It's crazy. Like they're really like the only other thing that's on their level is SU University, which like they have a hospital and good what the hell is it called? Uh, one of their programs is really strong. I can't recall what it is off the top of my head, but anyways, but yeah, I remember like in the '90s, you're talking going to Ames or the supermarket. PNC is what we had, and my mother's actually the one that she really liked the like Disney would have these kind of what we would now call like art cards basically where it was just like cards that were artwork from the various Disney movies and other ones as well, and
Yeah.
we just had a box that we would collect them and put them in there, and I think that kind of set me on that path where I got to keep the box and look through them, and we I noticed actually something I'm now as a parent kind of
Yeah.
thinking about more and more is my family, my mother and I, we had like dedicated game nights. And so it would be board games, card games, whatever. And we'd go camping and I'd play like various card games with my grandpa and grandma. And I'm realizing that all those things kind of set me up in a position where when I was old enough to kind of start making decisions and how I wanted to spend my allowance and
Mm.
found out about more things out there because you know this, but prior to the internet really being a thing, like magazines were how you found out about a
Oh
lot of
yeah,
stuff.
Beckett and whatnot. Pojo.
Yeah, yeah,
No one
yep.
remembers now that Pojo used to be a mag.
Yeah, and before in even what was it, Pojo Dojo or whatever was
Yeah,
like the early forms there.
yeah.
Uh, but yeah, that was how you found out about stuff,
Oh, I
and
miss the old Pojo boards too. Miss the old forums
that
from
like
the old internet.
I I will die on the hill that Discord is a horrible way to store information and discussions because it just kind of disappears into the aether of loading.
Oh, you say
Whereas
that there's.
for
Sorry to interrupt, but there was a forum I was on in about 2014, 15, 16. Got
okay,
erased by just the back end getting corrupted. Nothing was real stuff. I've only got a few screen captures of it, and there was some really insightful things on the game I was playing at the time. And it's just like, damn, why is that stuff lost to the ether?
it kills me because
Yeah,
it just and I know forums can get corrupted and everything else too, but like just the accessibility of being able it was basically already cataloged for you
yeah.
like
Discord
Facebook.
has forums now.
Oh, it does. So it's
I've
all
got one in the
circular. It's all
Hyperdricken
coming.
Discord, but apparently my some gamer dude one can have one now too for some reason, despite the fact I never applied for it. I found out when I was making this one.
Hey, cool. All right, I'll take it. So all right, so maybe it'll come back. But yeah, just all that stuff. It has made me really appreciate not only the time, but just to have, and I'm sure rose tinted goggles on it, but I'm sure you remember like going through like, oh, look at these new cards coming out in 2 months and
Yeah,
whatever else. I mean, life moves slower. There's no doubt about it, and games definitely released slower. But it just, I don't know. I I greatly enjoyed that part of my childhood, and I was not a video game player until later in life. That like it wasn't like my family was against it or anything. It's just
Yeah.
we were kind of broke, and like I really didn't get into video. I remember going to my friend's house and being like, "That's cool. You guys want to go outside? Like, do you want to play something that we can all do?"
My
And
adult cousin got me on it when I was like 5, and that was my Christmas present from my mum that year, Mega Drive.
okay, okay. I think I was down in Florida for a family vacation, and my cousin had a Game Boy, the old brick,
Oh yeah, I got one of
and
those.
and I he let me play it, and I thought it was cool. And I will say, I think my dad was he was kind of on the curve as far as adopting new technology, which was cool. And I think why I'm relatively computer literate
Mm,
was like he was into any new technology. He's like, let me figure. And even now, he's mid 70s.
yeah.
He's got all the new gadgets. When LEDs first came out, he was like, let me change over all my fluorescent lights and let me get these in the house and blah blah blah. So I think when he saw Game Boy and it reminded him of like he said he liked playing the old I think what is it like Jumpman or like Mario where Donkey Kong's throwing the barrels at you kind of
That's
thing.
the original Donkey Kong. Yeah.
Yeah, he said he used to go to the bar in the '80s and he
Mm.
would throw quarters in that all night.
Yeah, I think it
And
was an '83
so
release.
when he saw the Game Boy had I think it was Super Mario Land or just Mario Land, whatever the fuck
Super
it
Mario
was.
Land. I love that game so much.
Yep, yep, yep. So that he saw that and then so he went and like we stopped at an electronics shop
Yeah.
and he just picked up a what was it? Game Boy Pocket, I think it was.
Oh, you
The
did get it
smaller
right.
one. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so I got to play that and then I want to say maybe Christmas in '97 I got an N64 and I got two games for me, and my dad got one game for himself, so to speak.
GoldenEye.
And no, it was Super Mario 64, Diddy Kong Racing, and Rush, San Francisco Rush. That was the my because my brothers are 25 years older than me,
Oof.
so they were more interested in the more realistic racing game.
Yeah.
But I mean, we turned on Super Mario 64 and we at that time we had a big TV.
Yeah.
And I just remember the whole family was just in awe of like my god, look what they can do now kind of
You
thing.
don't get that experience anymore. I remember when the PS3 came out, and I was like, "Is that it? Is that the improvement over the PS2?" I don't really see it being that major. And every successful generation, I don't even think I'll pick up a PS5. I'll probably skip to PS6 at this rate because I'm like, yeah, I don't see any point in terms of actual improvements.
Graphical fidelity or whatever it is,
Yeah,
yeah.
and has no games well that appeal to me. It probably has games that appeal to other people, but in terms of my
Yeah,
tastes, and I think you could probably relate to this too. As you get older, your tastes refine, and you better know what you're going to like and what you're not going to like.
absolutely. That's I you kind of hit the nail on the head. I kind of we've talked about this before, but I basically pick a game or two for a console, and like I played. So just for context, so I used to be, I think, more of a air quotes gamer, but like the big games of my lifetime were probably GoldenEye,
Yep.
Super Smash Bros. 64, which led into Smash Bros. Melee,
Hot take: 64 is
which
my favorite Smash Brothers.
I'm not gonna judge. I've had many all nighters and played the crap out of it. I definitely, obviously, like I got more competitive, and I
Yeah.
really appreciated melee, uh, and the late 2000s, like, well, I guess like '04 onwards, I got into the competitive side of it.
Yeah.
And then I kind of, so I played Smash like throughout university and all that jazz. And around 2011, I Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3 came out, and that was a PS3 game. And that's kind of what eventually was like, okay, I want to buy a PS3.
Yeah.
I proceeded to play that until basically 20. And obviously, I wasn't playing all this time, but like, I was very in and out of games after like whatever generation the PlayStation 3 era was. Like, I never got into Xbox, and I think 2011 is pretty late into PlayStation 3's life, but
Yeah, I think it got replaced in 2014, but it lingered on
something
for a
like
while.
that.
But yeah, I think the PS4 came out in 14.
Yeah. And like, I just, I wasn't into stuff, and next time I bought a new console, what I bought a PS4 because a girlfriend dumped me and I had nothing better to do. I only had like two games for that, and I now it's in my closet. Like, I barely touched it. And then I will say I bought a Switch because the new Smash Brothers came out. I did not play the Wii U Smash, or the and Brawl was not my jam, but the Switch version, that Smash Brothers Ultimate there looked cool. Ended up playing that, and that's literally what's right in front of me now. And I think if I can say anything, I know this is a card game podcast, but just talking about games in general, the one thing, and I'm not a Nintendo fanboy, but I do appreciate that Nintendo doesn't really go too deep on the DLC in terms of like releasing unfinished games. And one of the games I do really like on the side is Disgaea, which is a kind of strategy RPG. And whenever it comes out on Nintendo systems, it has all the DLC included on it already.
Yeah, because other people
And
beta
that,
tested it for you.
yeah, really, really. And I mean, sure, I had to wait a while to get it, but as I mentioned, I buy a new game like once every half a decade, so it's not a big deal for me.
Yeah, as far as
Yeah,
video game, sorry.
no, no. Just as you get older, you kind of you know what you like, what you don't like, and I mean, I don't know what they are down in Australia, but like modern games aren't cheap. It's like 70, $80 for a new game, and like if I
Japan's
buy a
prices are pretty
game,
much on par with ours, except our prices include GST, sales tax.
okay, like but that's the thing. If you're paying that kind of money, I used to have like during the PlayStation 2 era, I had this philosophy of like I should get at least 1 hour of gameplay for every dollar my game costs, and that's only kind of gotten more intense as I've gotten older, where I want a couple hundred hours out of a game if I'm gonna spend $70 on it. And I think, got burned on a lot of the PS2, PS3 era games where I felt like maybe it was a good story, it was a fun experience, but it was like 30 hours for an RPG to me just felt like a sham. It was like, if I'm playing an RPG, I want this thing to go on forever.
Yeah,
So,
I think in a lot of ways, well, you have to remember back in the Super Nintendo Mega Drive / Genesis era, you played games to death because you got so few over a year. That's just the way it was. That
yeah, yeah.
started going away in the PS1 era because those discs became quite affordable, and there was. Did America calls Platinum Greatest Hits, don't they?
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
the cheap
I
versions.
remember, yeah, the $20 versions of games,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, and I think in a lot of ways, as games have become more story based, I think they also have become disposable. They're like play it
That's
once
true.
and then you don't want to play it ever again. It's like, yeah, I'm done.
That's true. I would concede that. I think it's become much more of a kind of fast food, so to
Yeah,
speak, nowadays. And like, and I was just as you were mentioning the early games, like I after I got older and kind of went back, Mega Man games were some of my favorite. And you can finish a Mega Man game in 40 minutes, but like
you
the
got to
thing
get
was
good.
like Yeah, that's the thing, is like there's so much replayability in some of those old quick games, and
Hmm.
it's not that like you finished, it's like, okay, I did it, but how many times did I die? Or like I my first Mega Man games, oh my god, it took me I didn't finish in one sitting, but like now I can pretty comfortably sit down, and specifically X and X4. Those are like my sit down, and I can crank them out in probably under an hour, even if I haven't played in a little while. But it's very tight gameplay. It feels good. Love the music, and that's a good time to me. I can go back and play that 50 times and still enjoy it.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of modern games really have that. Like, this is something I think we've discussed this on my Discord before. I don't know if you're involved in the conversation or saw it, but we talk about Pokemon a fair lot and Yu-Gi-Oh, because we'll get to cards in a little while, guys. We're nearly half an hour
Yeah.
in, and we still haven't even gotten to the first topic. But Pokemon, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I think from Generation 2 onwards, they're not very replayable games. Generation two's sluggy. Three's a little bit better. Four is where you get up to the story just taking forever. It's the main focus of everything. The attitude behind how the games are presented and are developed changes. You go back to Generation 1, and I think that's why you see so many YouTubers still cover it, like J Rose, who I was watching before this. He does
Oh yeah.
speed runs with individual Pokemon. Those first
Yeah, yeah.
games, because
Question.
they don't have much story, and because they're just Pokemon really, really raw, even if they got a lot wrong with them, subjectively or objectively, whatever, doesn't matter. They're still replayable to such a ridiculous degree. And we were even talking about this some time ago. The Pokemon trading card game on Game Boy. Yes, it's a very small pocket of time, but because of how well it is presented, how well it plays, and the enjoyability of that format, it's just replayable for years to come.
Absolutely. I would almost exactly agree. Like, Gen 1 was, I think, the only game or games in the series that I had Red and Blue
Same.
eventually, and
I,
like I
I was by more
definitely
till Gen 5.
okay. That's like, and I definitely went back and I think I would trade them over to one, like one
Yeah.
file had like all my favorites, whatever. But like I would just replay the other. And now I will admit, Gold and Silver is probably my favorite game, just because the music, the additions to the Pokemon that were like Scissor, and just visually I love Gold and Silver, and I remember being blown away when you finish the Elite Four, and they're like, by the way, now you can go back and do Johto, or excuse me, Kanto,
Yeah.
and obviously a streamlined version, but like my my brain of like, oh my god, they put two games in one, the value that I'm getting here, and obviously like being able to jump into what was it, Pokemon Stadium
Yeah.
with those games, like that was just like, oh my god, my mouth was watering. And I think everyone has this, but like I fell out of love with Pokemon in Gen 3 kind of towards the end of Gold and Silver, just
Yeah.
fell out of love with it, and that's totally fine. And I re-fell in love. I played what was it, Diamond and Pearl,
That's
but I
fun.
wasn't really into Pokemon at the time. I hated my job, and that was a good way to. I had the whatever the small 3DS was, and get 3DS Lite or whatever, and I was basically playing Pokemon just because I remembered how to play it, and it was a way to waste time at work. But when the remakes of Gold and Silver came out, that was just the right time in my life to catch my attention and really kind of draw me back in. And then I got into competitive Pokemon. And I think, as you mentioned, like Gen 1 for me, battling was just my buddies. And if you know Gen 1 competitive, it's not that
No.
diverse, so to speak. And it's a fun game, but it's a mess. But like Gen 4, I think many would argue is a really big turning point with the physical special split. And
Yeah.
there's so much there that then it became less about the story for me. And obviously, it was so much fun to replay with better graphics, and you got the little guy following behind you in the remakes of Gold and Silver. But that was the first time when it was like, I have no interest in starting over because now I have all this other shit that I would want to do with the game. I want to breed these Pokemon. I want to make this team. And I kind of that has I did play through Gen 5 and again loved the music and that I would say Gen 5 was the last Pokemon game that I really enjoyed. And I know you aren't a huge fan of Gen
It broke
5.
me.
It's and that I think again it was where I was in
Yeah.
my life. Like I can tell you like everything else that was going on in my life at that time and I think that's why it really sticks with me.
See, with Gen
Like,
3, I switched over to the cards. I did not enjoy the games. I think, in retrospect, those games in particular would greatly benefit from the attack split in Generation 4 having been implemented in 3. Because
yeah,
I don't know if this is a hot take or not, but I thought the remakes of Generation 3 are probably the best remakes they've done by a very far margin. Because I think ultimately that batch of Pokemon and that region benefits from all the updates the most. I think
that,
Not Hard Gold, Soul Silver, Fire Red, Leaf Green, none of the Pokemon really work the same way as they did in Generation 1. It feels very
different games in that
clunky.
like the actual yeah like I and I will say I think that's part of the reason why I never played the original Gen 3 and I obviously
You're
played
not
the
missing
remakes
much.
that like I think the physical special split adds so much to the game. Like obviously abilities did too, but just the what that added to the game as a guy that enjoyed that kind of critical thinking and battling against other players. I I think the types having locked in what type they used really took a lot of the excitement out of it for me because it was like just for example like Gengar getting levitate was huge. He was always good, but like that was just life changing. But the fact that he was running stuff like Thunder Punch or Fire Punch because the element was locked to his special stat rather than like just actually having good shadow moves a lot of the time because it was like I think or shadow ghost moves were physical I believe until Gen 4. So it was just like
It's unintuitive too.
yeah, like it was some of them I get it so to speak, but like not I can't tell you the physical special which is which.
Neither can I.
Whereas like whereas I feel like most of the after Gen 4 what is the move and you can probably guess
Yeah.
unless it's like a signature move or something silly, but anyways. But yeah, going one last point that you made about the TCG the card game Pokemon. That game, and I think we've talked about this, but like I have, I loved the first one to death. I didn't even know there was a second Japanese only one until
Ooh, ooh.
much later in
Pause.
life.
Pause. I found recently a hack that updates it to be the Neo card sets.
Oh, you got to send it to me
I
afterwards because
will. I
I
will.
was doing I was doing a playthrough on my Twitch where I was doing uh, the second game and
Yeah.
just like the deck building challenges and as obviously like I know the good decks of that era, but oh my god, I was having so much fun. And then they put little challenges in there, like there are NPCs with Haymaker, with Rain Dance, with like real competitive decks, and it it's just it's an absolute blast. And I think there's a YouTuber that you introduced me to that Shuckle,
Yeah.
and he just commented recently about the and here this will be our transition into cards but he just commented about Yu-Gi-Oh reprinting the first six booster packs
Mm.
as just completely like those are the sets completely reprinted all that and I just was like, and he commented, "How cool would that be for Pokemon?" And I was just blown away, jaw on the floor. Like, Magic can't do it with a reserve list, but Pokemon doesn't have an official reserve list, I don't think.
No.
And I know obviously there's issues with Wizards of the Coast, whatever, but
I actually don't think there is. They reprinted some of the base set cards as oversized cards a few years back. All the
okay,
starters from each generation. Exact.
okay, oh,
I don't
exact
remember.
copies.
Pretty much, but they don't mention Wizards of the Coast on them.
Okay, hey, I don't give any hoots about that, but I would absolutely love to have because
Even if they use the
one of the
modern
things
frames, I'd be fine with it.
no problem. Yeah, like whatever. Like the gameplay of that
Yeah,
era is so nostalgic to me, and this will kind of lead into that first question in a second. But um, I think that would just be the coolest thing in the world, and you've probably thought this too, that I would love to play that with friends, with my family, etc. But the cost to play that era of the game now is prohibitively expensive, and especially if I want to play with my young son or my wife who's not really into games, I don't want to break the bank just for that.
dude,
But I
fire up
would,
the printer.
and I mean, like it's on the list, but it's one of those things where it's just it's fun to open booster packs and stuff too, and I don't necessarily have that nostalgia for what I would want to do with it, but for my son, for my wife, I think that would be just such a great family activity.
Mm,
And I'm like, my son is now 14 months. We don't let him watch TV. We don't let him use any kind of smart device. Like, he reads books, and that's about it. And
yeah.
we just counted the other day. Uh, as of right now, he reads regularly about 60 or so books. Like, that he knows the pictures. He'll pick them up and ask them to be read, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I am very happy about that, but I want to continue giving him good options. And I understand why so many people end up using smart devices or putting on the TV or whatever. It's tough, but I want to have those options, but I want them to be interesting and fun for him too. So, and modern Pokemon is cool and great, but it's a very different game than what I grew up on, and I guess this is the selfish side of it, but I would love for him to have a chance to experience some of that as well.
Yeah.
So, with that being said, let me. I have the
I just
questions
want to
you.
pause you for 1 second. We were
Yep.
talking about video game costs earlier, and I didn't get to mention this. I'm the type of person now that and I've been like this for years now. Uh, I don't buy games unless they're on sale.
That, yeah. Now, do you buy physical copies or
Yes,
do you prefer digital copies?
I prefer physical.
Yeah, 100%. It's, if I don't own it in my hand, then there's no reason someone else can't say I don't own it anymore whenever they feel like turning the servers off.
I mean, I've got a few games downloaded over the years, but I
Yeah, of
always
course.
make sure to pay very, very little for them because the back of my mind, it doesn't exist.
Yeah, 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 yeah. That, that's same with card games, all that stuff. Like I'm very hesitant, and you're gonna suck me back into this, but the modern gotcha game on the phones, computers, etc., is the most insane thing in the world to me. The amount of money they make with no physical production cost and just copy and paste and make the rates low and all the serotonin abuse
Mm,
of it hurts my soul, and but that's for another day. Today,
yeah, we better
let
get
me
on.
ask you.
It's 40 minutes in. We better get into it.
Yeah, if this was my class, all the kids would be like, "Yep, this is exactly what he's like." It's 40 minutes in. Okay, now let's open our textbooks. So, tell me, some gamer dude. I don't know if I'm allowed to use your real name or
Oh,
not.
you can. I don't
So,
mind.
all right. So, Eric, what are you playing at the moment? Where
Well,
are you at with games?
well, I think you can relate to this having very, very little time. I'm in the exact same situation you've described before, where it's like, okay, everyone, can you meet up? Oh, work's in the place. You got other things going. Okay, this week. Okay, next week, and it's like, oh, finally, we made time. But
Yeah. Yeah.
of course, Hyperduke, and I play that every time I get a chance. Playtesting, fun, whatever. But at the moment, I'm actually trying to get back into Vanguard D. I've been printing
Okay.
out a ton of decks because there's no local scene really. There's no point in buying cards. But
Yeah.
I've just been trying to get back into that because I know it's not the going over the greatest right now. It's got its issues, but I didn't like the middle era, the V era, and I have
Mhm.
next to no interest in premium. It's hitting the right spots in it a lot for me, and I've got that Vanguard itch. It's what I want to play,
Hey, when you get the itch, you gotta play it.
and related to a lot of my interest at the moment is stuff that is either hard to get or old. Like I want to play
Yeah.
Gen 3 and Gen 2 Pokemon again. I'm planning to
Yep.
print
Yep.
out a bunch of stuff for that.
Oh,
And I've been trying out a bit of that wrestling card game that's fan continued WWE Raw Deal. I got to try it by
oh
myself
yeah.
the other week. I rather enjoyed it. It
Hey, cool.
it's got a really odd curve to it where it's like, okay, because things have to hit to become resources in it,
Okay.
and you gain resources equal to the amount of damage they do.
Okay, so if it does 2 damage, then it creates 2 resources.
No, if the attack has 2 damage, well, most things are 4 upwards. If it, regardless of how much damage it does, as long as it has inflicted damage, when it resolves, it gets sent to your ring, where it counts as 4 resources. It uses a threshold system called Fortitude.
Okay.
So, like your next
Interesting.
card might have 14 Fortitude, so the total amount of damage in your ring has to be 14 plus.
Ah, I see. Okay.
Yeah, it's very, very frustrating on the first couple of turns. It's like, does this hit? No. Does this hit? No. And then it's like, oh shit, something hits. Something hits, and then you can keep going because the game has a if something hits, you can keep going. Otherwise, your turn
I
ends,
okay.
and you have
Have
to inflict full damage to keep going. And it's
Mhm.
like the beginning's stressful, and then it just gets into a good pace, and then it ends with a massive boom. I think in a lot of ways it does Flesh and Blood's uh, gimmicks a little bit better. That's my take.
Hey, you've taught me like a whole from playing Hyperjukin. I learned kind of a another side to card games because I will admit that like outside of Pokemon, I hadn't really tried any non-Magic E type game. That's not true. I played Yu-Gi-Oh and stuff too, but just I don't know that system of like I think we you described it once upon a time as the fighting games type thing,
Yeah,
and that was a totally unexplored world to me. And now after having played Hyperjukin a couple times, I can understand and appreciate that game flow and it really I'm constantly impressed at just the different ways to play a game that are still enjoyable and can encapsulate different experiences. And obviously, I'm biased. I Magic was my first
yeah.
game, and I'll always have kind of a soft spot for that type of game. But even like for Caster Chronicles, something that no one has ever talked about or cared about, but
Oh no, no,
like
no! The
even
review I did that was by request. Someone cared about casters.
hey, I mean, I still get people once in a while that are like, "Hey, do you have any of these horny cards?" And I'm like, "Yeah, here, you want some?" But like, even trying it out, and I think I posted this recently. Like, I I really think that card game players and I don't want to say this in a negative or bad way, but I think sometimes they feel like it's a zero sum game where they can't enjoy something else without taking away from their game of preference, so to speak.
Yeah,
And I've obviously time is limited and it gets only worse as you get older,
yeah,
but I I think there's a pleasure if a game, and I'll underline this with, if a game is built in such a way that it can be played relatively quickly out of the box, or that you can jump in and start playing, it's fun to learn a new rule system and kind of see the logic to it. Now, there are absolutely some games where I just didn't get it, like, or it just didn't click with me. The
yeah.
Lord of the Rings game in like the early 2000s, uh, it was cool to see the characters and whatnot, but I just could not grasp how to play it. And so I was like, these cards are cool, but that's all. And
Yeah.
you know what? And that's great. But I encourage anyone who's listening, and I know I saw Foyle's there. Foyle's the champ when it comes to trying out a million different games. And like, I I really think it does nothing but improve your appreciation for good games and let you recognize maybe what you like or dislike in games. So it's absolutely, when your friend brings a new game, hey guys, you want to try this out? I brought a deck for you. Give it a shot. You never know. Like, it's worth it. Well,
I wonder how much time being pressured it does play into. Okay, I came here to play this game. I only want to play this game. No, I don't care about your game.
that's very true, and especially now, like, everything is go go go, rush rush rush. Like, and someone made a good point to me. Well, let me explain what games I'm playing, and
Yeah,
then this will kind of go into this point. So, similar to your Hyperjukin, I am playtesting right now Omega for Tenshoku,
yeah.
the
I didn't know if
final
you
set.
wanted to show that at the beginning.
Slightly, but no, I'm still I'm playtesting. I'm trying to a new thing where rather of course I have all the Omega printed out on just
Yeah,
paper to playtest, but I tried out a like real digital printer just to print out a couple play sets so that I don't know. There's something about I think having tangible real cards that is helpful to me at least to like feel like okay now I'm really testing because sometimes with my proxies I wouldn't update them. I would just remember what the new version did, but like 5 to 10 iterations in, I'm like, what does this card actually do? How much does it actually cost? And so having them at a point now where they've all been made into their proper
because you don't use
photo.
wizard style test prints, do you? You just go straight to the.
No, like, well, I use Magic Set Editor
Yeah,
to do my tests, and then I just print those out and make decks out of those, and then
yeah. I'm Mr. Professional
normally
Wizards of the Coast guy here. I use my black and white, just the generic frame with text on it.
I've seen your proxy. They're good. It just nah. I don't. There's something about it. Just I actually I have my original testing is what I actually took from Force of Will. It is a deck that literally only has numbers 1 through 40, and then you in a spreadsheet you just put what the cards are on that spreadsheet, and then you play that way. But
Oh, that's
that
frustrating.
yeah, it's really tough to go back and forth and like what. And it's funny. Eventually, like, all right, 1 through 4 is this card, 5 through 8 is this card. But it doesn't. It's almost impossible to get anyone else to want to test with you doing that kind of stuff. Like it's good for gold fishing, but it's very tough to let someone else try. And I think the visuals are a huge part of games. So when I get to that point, so I'm trying kind of a third level where I'll make a almost real version, and I also
Yeah.
just wanted to just see what the quality was like. But I'm testing that. I'm enjoying that. I'm playing. as I mentioned, I met some guys here in Japan that also play pre-modern Magic the Gathering, which
Yeah,
is my pinky out creme de la creme these days. Um, it just it is the Magic that I love and I remember,
yeah,
and I think that's what it really comes down to is like it is it is the Magic that I fell in love with, and nothing more, nothing less.
yeah.
And the fact that it is also a closed box, so to speak, in that Wizards can't add new cards to it, their new design philosophies can't affect it. Unfortunately, the reserve list does, but I'm lucky enough where I have most of the reserve cards that would be played, and no one cares in pre-modern if you do proxy. It's kind of encouraged. You want to use gold border, do it.
So I
You
can
want to
run up
use
with my
just
60 card printed?
yep. Yeah, one of the guys at the event I went to, the whole 75 complete computer paper,
Two office
and
works.
and it was just like, hey, no problem, man. Like we're that's and I think that's the thing I appreciate is like it is to me pre-modern is whatever you want it to be.
Mm.
If you like for me, I purposely go out of my way. I love black border old cards with the old border. That's
The
to
old
me
frame has
that's
a lot of character, the modern one lacks. The modern one's
yes.
very
And
utilitarian.
I have stacks of them here in front of me, and I'm just like, yes, I can read the new cards very well. Like I'm happy the rules text is clarified
Old green is
sometimes.
hard to read.
That it's very fair, but at the same time, it just to me is like this is the Magic that I love, and nothing can like the artwork being actual like non-digital mediums for the most part because it only goes up to pre-modern ends with Scourge, which is 2003, and I think there's maybe I think no our chroma's not there's maybe a couple early computer graphic
How does that relate to
like
6th edition? Because 6th edition is the big change for Magic, isn't it?
sixth edition was a big rules change, and like so the one thing that I do like so pre-modern, unlike old school or some of the other formats, uses all modern rules, so
Ah,
it makes it
so no
very
mana burn.
easy. No mana burn, no damage on the stack, modern mulligan rules,
Hmm.
and the the thing that I think is underappreciated about that is A, it makes it very easy to jump into a game or for someone else to hand them a deck and here you go.
Yeah, actually,
Because
that's why I was
I
asking
have
about slivers, because I was thinking later on, once I have a setup for it, and I'll buy a webcam, could play Magic as part of this.
yeah, absolutely. We'll have it in the background. And that's like I some of the guys I met, they said like I started playing Magic in 2015 and my brain kind of breaks a little bit because I'm just like their life experience with Magic is so short and their what they consider like normal is so wildly different than me.
Yeah,
But the fact that all the rules are the same means they can jump in and play. Or the other thing is, if you wanted to play on the official client, MTGO, you can do that with pre-modern because the rules don't change. And so the client uses the modern rules.
I'm
Whereas
old.
some
I
of
remember stuff like Cockatrice.
yeah, yeah, and that's like old school or 93, 94, or some of the others, you
I've
have
wanted to
to
play that.
play you can play them on cockatrice or whatever, or like obviously in person is when it's juicy. But
Yeah.
like the mechanics of like there is mana burn and there is those issues in old school in 93, 94, and so it becomes something that you can't replicate with technology if you wanted to play online. And we'll talk a little bit about the on off after,
Yeah.
but just going to talk about so the time wise that a buddy of mine recently was just like, this is the Magic that I fell in love with. This is why I became a Magic player. And I think that for me, those cards of that era, that that is like magic to me. Like if you tell me, oh yeah, the creatures are super strong and they end the game quick, I think of Yu-Gi-Oh. I don't think of Magic.
Yeah.
But if I look at modern decks sometimes, and even Legacy and Vintage, like some of my favorite, what were my favorite formats, I've kind of fallen out of love. I never thought I'd fall out of love with Legacy. And I have slowly started to fall out of love with Legacy just because so many of the creatures and so many of the spells that I thought were immutable have just slowly been replaced. And for the first time, I think ever, I finally took apart my legacy decks. I have all my dual lands back in a binder, and I'm just like, I couldn't play these decks with anyone because they're not. I haven't updated a legacy deck in since 2016, and so much has happened in the last 7 8 years in Magic that I just couldn't play with those decks and have an interesting game. It would be we both know Force of Will. It'd be like playing Force of Will from 2017, 2018 with modern decks, and it's just like it's not a game, so to speak.
Yeah, and going back to what you said about the older cards infesting the legacy formats, I think what's the big point there is as Magic changed as a game, I think its identity changed because of, while Wizards hasn't outright said it, I think they desperately were chasing the Yu-Gi-Oh type crowd and where the market was going. I think I've talked about this at some point on the channel, but I think that itself changes Magic's identity as a game,
And, and
and you
not
can
only
feel that.
that, but I think that the culture has changed as well. I've seen younger people or just people that are newer to Magic, they look at games, like formats like pre-modern, like this looks boring. This doesn't look fun. Like, and it it's a shock to my system. At the same time, I mean, I don't know about you. I don't watch TikTok. I don't watch
No,
Instagram. I'm not into short form media.
no.
But I think that the modern game, and this is something we'll talk more about, I'm sure, but like Magic is a different game for different people. And I think all games are like this, but as they change, the same with Yu-Gi-Oh, the same with Force of Will, I'm sure the same with many Pokemon even, that there's probably for many people, if they stopped playing a game, there's probably a point where their threshold was met. Ha, I made a pre modern joke talking about it. But there's a threshold where the game's identity is no longer corresponding with what they mentally associate that game with. And a
Absolutely.
healthy response. A healthy response to that is okay, this is no longer for me. I will not participate or I will not do that. I will continue to play with what I like.
Yeah.
However, that is often not the case, especially when it's maybe your first time going through that and there are arguments. And as I'm saying this, when Brawl came out, the Melee and Brawl feud was huge because the game went from hyper competitive to super casual. When another game that I can speak with some authority on is Force of Will. It absolutely is a different game now.
Oh yeah.
Now, I have personal visions of it being a lesser game, but there are people that like better the game. And I know you liked the Alice Origins. That was more your like just speed, style, design was more your cup of tea and
The speed
totally
and
fine.
power was what I could cope with, and I liked a lot more of the design style. They're going back to older cards. Is it my ideal Falseville? It's probably the closest, but it's not perfect by any regard.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's true for many games. So I think it just is one of those things where if you choose to stick with the game long term, and I don't just mean like, hey, I picked up this game for a couple weeks, I'm going to probably play it. That's cool.
When
Do
it becomes a
whatever.
lifestyle thing.
Yes. And sometimes as I've gotten older, I've seen more and more of the addiction side of it where people can't stop.
Oh, I
And
got in big trouble on my Discord for using that word.
addiction? No, absolutely. It is manufactured addiction. It is absolutely part of the industry. Like, if I asked, for example, I won't use names because we're doing a fun podcast, but if I asked some of the people behind the scenes at major card games what the pull rates are, they could spend hours going over exact rates, how exactly they want people to pull, what they want them to pull,
Hmm.
how many good cards should be in a set, etc. They could go into depth. If you ask them what cards are being played currently, they would have no clue. They would have no association with the game itself, only with the play pieces and their accessibility and what that would mean in terms of per person capita spending.
Yeah.
And that is absolutely manufactured, and I understand and you understand that you do need some of that for a game to function as a product,
Yeah.
but
Even as an
as a
indie game, you
player,
need certain thresholds met to continue.
yes, but as a player, I'm not concerned with any of that. My printer is just as good as yours in that case. And I think that, I think I am saddened sometimes when I see young people or even older people, people in general, that fall victim to the dopamine hits or their community or their game abusing them past what the I believe is a healthy threshold. And now that's the thing. There's a threshold that's different for everybody. I have certain standards that I think are healthy. Other people may disagree, and that's totally fine. But it just bums me out sometimes when I see people, and I've seen it in Magic for many years, even back in the day, spending money they did not have for discretionary spending on things they shouldn't be buying. And then the horror stories that come afterwards of like, I gotta sell everything to pay for my car.
Yeah.
And it's like, and they're getting robbed both ways because no one's ever paying full price when the guy needs money kind of
No.
thing. So it just, that kind of stuff breaks my heart. But yeah, so there's a lot in there. Um, going to I want to kind of I talked a lot about age. I want to know, what do you think, has age changed your gaming preferences over time, do you think?
Oh, yes, yes. I was thinking about this recently, actually, because for those who aren't in any of our Discords, we discussed what topics we wanted to talk about today about a week in advance. So, back when I was young, I drifted from, in terms of actual play, Yu-Gi-Oh! Because I mostly collected when I was young. Most people did back then. It was the style of the
Okay.
time. But
Check out my binder, bro.
yeah, yeah. So in terms of actual play, I went Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon, Naruto, quitting for a while. There's a couple of little things I tried here and there, but I'm looking at my tastes as they have evolved, and the one that really sticks out to me is the World of Warcraft TCG. So
Oh, yeah.
back
Okay.
when I was
Okay.
that age, I
Mhm.
didn't like classical fantasy. I
Okay.
tried the World of Warcraft TCG at Supernova, which is one of the pop culture conventions down here.
Okay.
Got a free starter deck. I really liked the game, but because of the aesthetics and the theming, I
Mhm.
didn't play it. And now I think as I got older, I would have really, really enjoyed that game. And I didn't. I'm sure I can find those stuff online, run it through an AI upscaler, print it out, have fun, whatever. But it's not going to be the same experience. And that's where I relate to my taste changing over time. Like
Oh,
when I was a kid, I would never have thought about playing Magic or anything adjacent to it. Duel
mhm.
Masters was the closest I got. And I
Is
forgot Duel
that
Masters when I was
because
mentioning
of?
games.
Oh yeah, is that because of the fantasy aspect, or was it the gameplay?
Fantasy aspect.
Okay,
I wasn't into
okay.
that type of stuff. You have to understand, when I was a kid, the type of stuff I mostly gravitated towards was like Transformers, Ninja Turtles, then Pokemon and Digimon, Dragon Ball, that type of stuff. So
Okay, okay.
traditional fantasy was nowhere near my radar.
Got you. And now, as we'll we'll say a functioning adult, as we both clearly are, would you say now, like, what are when you approach any game? Because I know for a long time the Some Gamer Dude channel was kind of focused on looking at various games and analyzing them and whatnot. What would you say as you got older was kind of the things that tickled your fancy in terms of like this is attractive to me or this is something that turns me off immediately? Like where did you go as you kind of, I don't want to say professionally approach games, but as a more serious endeavor?
As I think there's a big change you can see in how I look at games with the Castle Chronicles review, and
Hmm?
around that era, I can put aside my personal biases on theming and art style to focus more on the gameplay more heavily. Like, I know you're not a fan for good reasons, but I'll die on the hill that I don't like Gate Rulers aesthetics. I think they're very unappealing and a big turnoff. But the gameplay itself, if it was an affordable game, I could quite happily sit there and play it.
That's, like,
And I think it is a
and
magnitude of times better than its predecessor, Buddy Fight was, which at the time when it came out, I thought was a dreadful game.
and now hold on, Buddy Fight is similar rule set to Gate Ruler, right?
Yeah, Gate
But
Rule is
like,
basically a refined, more adult Buddy Fight with a lot of the bullshit
okay,
removed.
I see. So like now, would you say that in your reviewing of all types of games, you came to appreciate more the gameplay rather than just the aesthetics
The
of
experience,
games?
yeah.
Okay.
One thing that have, and this is why I died down on reviewing games, and this relates to what Bandai's doing at the moment. I have become very, very tired, very, very tired of its Duel Masters, but
Yeah, yeah.
I love Duel Masters. If Takara Tomi's supposed Asian English edition came down here, I'd be on it like a nothing could keep me away
White
from
on
it.
rice.
Yeah, but I am really, really tired of Duel Masters type games. It's like none of them really scratch the same itch in the same way.
Hmm, hmm.
It's like you can feel the design is so radically different in terms of cards. Like Digimon, I like the IP. I like the gameplay in terms of the demo on the phone and the starter decks. I when I got to the actual game when the booster packs came out, I didn't enjoy it at all because I didn't enjoy the card design.
That's an interesting point that you make too. That like Digimon for I want to say the pandemic era kind of came out roaring, and
Yeah,
I I, th- I thought the demo, as you said, the demo had such a cool idea that I was just like, this plays neat. This is interesting. I don't mind this. And there was another game. Uh, oh, it was the ARG made game, Argent Saga.
Oh yeah.
That I played the like the demo decks, or they sent me some preview stuff because I had worked with them in the past when I was with Force, and so he just sent me all the demo stuff, and I played with a buddy, and I said like, this is a game that I don't necessarily want to play multiple times in one evening, but I absolutely had a nice time playing it once, and like it was a fun enough game. But then when the booster pack started coming out, it wasn't my cup of tea, and
I heard it was broken from the first booster packs.
I I got that vibe too, and I can easily see. I know nothing against the designers because I know some of them, but like just it.
A lot of for those who don't know about the actual design process, a lot of stuff will go under your radar, and it's like,
Yeah,
oh crap, that does that.
yeah, that I'm sure Hyperjukin's maybe a little bit safer because set one was in the tank for so long, but like
Set two's a mess. I'll be open with that.
the look at Beta. Beta is a spiteful like hate mail that was written on like Twitter in card form, and I mean at the same time, and for people that don't know this, card design is never perfect. It is,
No.
I think, the pleasure in making games is the hunt for the unobtainable perfection.
Yes.
And that is the fun part of it. And for those of us lucky enough for other, in like Hyperjukin, Tenshoku, whatever, even Force of Will and bigger games that like at the end of the day, I think it's very important for the creators to be so appreciative that people are willing to spend their time on their game in any capacity. And and I will say this, there are brilliant people in the world that can put cards you never thought together. You're working, I know Hyperjukin makes what, 30 to 50 unique cards per set kind of thing. And
We're down to 24. That's what budget can
okay, hey,
allow.
hey, budget is king. But like, so you got numbers like that. Tenshoku has 132 per set. Like,
You don't have the budget I do, mate.
they don't. There's no way a small team can ever test everything.
No.
But there are rules that can keep you on the right track to some degree.
Absolutely.
Now, I have a very bad habit, and I've done this on every Tenshoku set, of when I'm putting cards into Photoshop and kind of finalizing them, something with the font just doesn't look right, and I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna change this so it's aesthetically pleasing with how it fits in the text box.
I know the feeling.
That that has come back to bite me on multiple occasions, where I'm just like, what if I move the colon here? What could that possibly do? Like, oh, adding a once per turn clause would make this one extra line? Well, that looks ugly. I don't want to add that. No problem.
Space between characters and line space are your friend.
Oh my god. That was the biggest. It's totally unrelated, but going into my Tenshoku like review when I go through the Photoshop files, more often than not, nowadays I don't have so many typos. I don't have so many like major issues, but that's the big one is like getting the spacing right, getting all the like line spacing to look good. And anyways, but yeah, like as card designers, that's kind of that chase for the unobtainable is kind of the joy and pleasure in it. And every time anyone picks up Tenshoku from me, the first thing out of my mouth is thank you so much for watching my videos or watching my or coming to my website and being willing to put any amount of money into my game, as even if it's just covering shipping, like that means so much to me. Someone's willing to
Yeah,
put their time, effort into my game for 5 seconds.
yeah, I
And
can feel that. I'm because of time differences. I'm usually seeing anything on my phone when I first wake up. It's like, oh, that is a great way to start the day.
oh my, yeah, like best thing in the world is some you get a bing on your email or something, and it's like, hey, I'd like to try out your game. Can you send me a set? I'm like, oh my god, I will cross mountains and swim through oceans to get that to you.
Yeah,
It just it mean and it means a lot.
yeah.
And if Foyo, if you're still in here, like it means so
We love
much
you,
to,
bro.
I'm sure, yeah, like it means so much to Eric and myself to have him give our games a try and to watch other people playing. I have a section of uh like I guess it's in my Discord, but like I save everyone that sends me pictures playing with their friends, playing with Tenshoku and stuff. Like that is the most heartwarming thing in the world to me, to see people sitting around a table playing my game with their friends is like all the motivation in the world.
Yeah,
But um uh, talk just to kind of, I apologize to talk twice, so to speak, but uh, talking about my kind of experience with age and gaming, like I just like you said, early '90s, I 100% collector.
was
The
the
idea of
style of the
playing,
time.
yeah, it really was. Like, remember you played and sleeves weren't really a thing. Penny sleeves were like, why are you spending $1 to sleeve cards?
Oh,
Like,
I
what
was
is
actually going to
this?
buy penny sleeves the other day, and they're like $5 for 100. I'm like, no way. I'll go buy a
So
1,000 on Amazon for $20.
yeah, right. And I eventually I got into Magic, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh in the or the early 2000s, excuse me. I actually got into Yu-Gi-Oh when it was Japanese only, and
Oh,
then I was like waiting for it to come out in the US. But I think Magic I played more casually. I played with my stepbrother, and he was a bit older than me, so he was better at explaining, because Magic is not an easy game, and I didn't have an old rules book, so I kind of got word of mouth how to play for a while. Pokemon is where I really understood the game, started going to tournaments, and really liked the atmosphere of like. And I've found that this stayed with me, but like playing in tournaments, but also appreciating brewing, so to speak, and that I loved knowing what the good decks were, being able to play them and be a competent player,
yeah.
but also trying to kind of leave my mark on decks. I remember I played Rain Dance with Larvitar, like Tyranitar or whatever, just because or maybe it was, no, Rain Dance was my just serious deck. I think I did Haymaker, but I threw in like Tyranitar when he came out because I was like, more damage, darkness energy, let's go. I'm not afraid of anything.
Something I think people forget about Haymaker was a lot of the components came in starter decks. It was really cheap.
Yeah, like Electabuzz, I think was the only card that you had to buy. I remember but even then, expensive back then is a different world than today. Like expensive was $5 to $10.
Yeah.
I like
And
most
this,
expensive card in the set was Charizard. And just to give, if anyone doesn't know, Magic in the '90s, if you paid more than $20 for basically anything, was insane. Maybe Power 9 was up there, but like Underground Seas were $25.
yeah,
Like
but 20
you,
bucks was a lot different value back then.
that's true. And just people didn't, it wasn't an investment vehicle or a retirement
Nah.
thing. Like they were game pieces. It really was. They were game pieces. I remember, what was it? Vampire Lord and Yu-Gi-Oh!
Yeah.
That was, and Jinzo were some of like the first expensive secrets, because the first secrets were crap. Um, but
Guy the
those
Dragon
ones,
Champion and Trihorn Dragon.
yeah,
I
yeah.
have
And I
Trihorn
remember
Dragon.
it was like, Yeah, hell yeah. But like they weren't tournament cards, and so it was like when Jinzo came out, it was like, wait, the secret is like a mandatory card that you need.
Yeah.
Like that started, hey, and whatever.
I had
But
to wait for the
just
tins for mine.
okay, all right, fair enough. I got lucky with some of my stuff, but
I have
then
two first edition Magician's Force Dark Magician goals, though.
ooh, oh god,
Both pulled.
do you remember early Yu-Gi-Oh had tournament packs that had unique cards?
Yeah, I never got them.
Okay, so buddy of mine opened Mechanical Chaser, which at the time
Was the best
was
card.
yeah, like multiple hundreds of dollars, and I forget what we traded it for, or he traded it, and we were kind of in and out together. But I just look back at like, my God, like just this is still when trading was like the main way
Yeah.
of getting cards. Like buying cards was
Oh,
not.
I remember back in school days, my mate used to trade bunches and bunches of commons. It's like, here, have these 50, 100 cards for your one good card. And kids were like,
Oh, and
yeah!
yeah, yeah. Oh, I remember I traded a Raichu, a foil Raichu in base set
That was the last card I
for
needed to complete base set. That was hard for me to get.
I think I traded it for like an Onyx and an Earth Energy because I needed them for a deck I was making and I didn't have the energies, and it was like, to me that was more useful than this Raichu that I was never gonna play, and I didn't really like Raichu, so I was like, well, whatever. And
Raichu's
it
my
was
favorite Pokemon.
well, all right, well, fair enough. But like that was just, it was a different world.
Yeah.
And like I remember the beginning of value trading, where you trades were done with TCG Player Open or some version of it, and it was like match the value of the cards.
Yeah, we did that
And
with magazines a bit here when Yu Gi Oh came around.
yeah, like I that era of that specific style of trading, like trade binder, get out the value thing.
Yeah.
I was lucky enough to have been in the card game scene long enough to kind of have some future sight, and I will just say I made out very well predicting kind of things prior to like value changing.
Yeah.
And anyways, but in the 2000s I really started getting into Magic again. I had a lot of friends that were into it and they were doing tournaments, and like it just kind of, I turned from casual Magic to tournament Magic,
Yeah.
and Legacy I think came out 1.5 became Legacy and extended in '04 or '05, something like that.
Because you jumped over
And
to Forceville because of the resource system, didn't you?
yeah, in 20, what was it, 2015, I was I was still playing Legacy, and I was like the guy that would go to a card shop and create a Legacy scene. And at the time, Legacy was something that you could still work into buying into.
Yeah.
Like Modern was a thing, but it was kind of like, yeah, whatever. Who wants to play with weak cards? We got Legacy over here. And dual lands were still, non-blue ones were under $100, so it was still like, if you were a teenager, like I talked to a couple like high school kids or university kids, and we're like, yeah, if you save up like your part-time job money, like you can pick these up on the side, and after a year or two, you can have a serious Legacy deck. But obviously that changed. But
Yeah.
what basically happened was, it just, I played a game of, I played a tournament of Magic and just got land screwed out of not playing the game, and then shortly thereafter, someone's like, "Hey, why don't you give this game a try? It's Force of Will, and $20 for a starter deck, whatever." Picked it up with my buddy. We
Were
played
the
it.
Allostecs out at that point?
Say it again.
Were the Allostecs out at that point?
Yes, it was exactly that. It was the Alice starter decks, and I played, I think, one game, and the resource system combined with, I didn't do it correctly, but I understood the judgment system, and I loved the mechanical complexity of choosing when to do it. And honestly, that's one thing that I don't know how you feel about it, but one of the biggest disappointments of competitive Force of Will is finding out that a great deal of the game mechanics were basically irrelevant because the best things to do were very linear and kind of streamlined.
or shut them
And
down.
it was like, I mean, play, reflect, refrain. He's the best ruler. Like, don't judgment for basically any other ruler. There's no reason to play them.
Yeah.
And it really disappointed me, on top of the fact that I hate games that don't have appropriate answers to threats. Whatever those threats may be, whether it's rulers, whether it's lands and magic, whatever, I don't like games where the threats are way too strong and there is no effective answer. So, like, when Regalia came out, there was no way to get rid of them.
I still
That
argue that was a form of evasion. There
it,
should have been addition J rules.
it absolutely, and I get it. Like, there's theming to it or whatever, but
Oh, that's
like,
something that pisses me off with Forceful, especially as it evolved and they kind of went there, then didn't, and it went all over the place. The game has very, very rich theming, and I think it's very, very, very prominent in the appeal of the game. As soon as you get to competitive
absolutely,
play, it's not really there.
no, it falls off. And I
And they don't
would
follow
you
up on
say,
things, at least historically.
oh, that was I've spoken with AG multiple times about that driving me insane. But and that was actually in my original business plan, was like, go back, revisit stuff, and that's, I mean, again, everything Force does is good idea, bad execution.
Yeah.
But like, the Return to New Valhalla was supposed to be like, hey, we remember these things, but then don't support anything. But anyways, yeah. So got into that, and that basically, jumping into Force of Will was kind of the beginning of the end for me.
Mm.
I stopped playing Magic. I was into Force of Will. I started working for Force of Will. I stopped playing basically games altogether outside of just like previewing stuff, and that was it. And then when I left Force, I was kind of done with card games for a bit. And
Yeah.
obviously, like, Tenshoku was on my mind as like, uh, how would I do Force kind of thing. And I think for the goals I set out for, I'm very happy with Tenshoku in terms of like how legends work compared to rulers, how like bigger threats are viable to play, how like some of like the key components that I wanted to see, hand traps are a thing in like viable and almost necessary, but still I think like a good trade-off of you can play around all of them in a very reasonable way. So I'm very happy with what I did with that, but it also kind of, outside of, almost don't even count Tenshoku as a card game in a way for me, because it's also so much more than that. It's kind of a
You're emotionally
passion.
invested.
Yeah, yeah. And it wasn't until a year into the pandemic, I was working on Gamma, and I heard about pre-modern, and that was kind of my re falling in love with Magic as a whole, but then also just card games in general.
Mm.
And I think, you know what I think back to a lot, actually? I don't know if you even remember this, but in 2018, I did an AMA, I think, and we had a little argument, and I don't even remember what it was about, but it was relatively design based.
Yeah.
And that was our first interaction, I think. Or at least like meaningful one on one back and forth
Yeah, I
interaction.
think it was. I did uh, do a bit of the streams with Jordan. I actually
Okay.
was recapping them under a different name on the Reddit for quite some time. And
Gotcha.
yeah,
Like, I remember back then I remember like had a very different. You were still working on Hyperdukin, I think, at the time,
Yeah,
but it had a very different like design approach, and obviously like you've learned so much since then, and I have too. But like I think around the same time I fell in love with pre-modern, I also and had been working on Tenshoku. It kind of hit me that I wanted to advocate more for more games. I fell in love with games again, so to speak. And maybe it was just age, timing, whatever, but I don't think I could have appreciated like Hyperjuken, a game with the rule set is so alien to me,
mm.
or I could have appreciated a lot of even modern Pokemon or a lot of modern Magic design. I wouldn't be able to appreciate them in the same way I can today, or even Force of Will, which I don't like the design, but I understand why people do. And I think I needed that kind of break from playing, from everything, to really kind of fall back into it. And I
Yeah.
would say now, like, I have no interest in competitive tournament level card games anymore.
But you
I
wouldn't have
like
the
playing
time
like
with your with kids and work and everything.
yeah, yeah. It's just like to me, my ideal is like I'm happy to go to like a 3 round event, round robin, where we all go and have a beer afterwards. Like
Yeah,
that to me is that's what card games kind of were at the beginning for me when I got into it, minus the beer, and now kind of at the other end of it, they're that again. And obviously, I do my card game work for like education side of it, but that to me is very it's almost not even a game. That's like research, and it those are much more mechanical. Like I have a very specific function I need the game to do, and it has to fulfill these requisites and language level and XYZ. So,
yeah. Just to
anyway,
pause you there. We're going over time a lot more than I expected. Probably wrap it up in half an hour.
all right, yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna piss
We're,
off everyone. Like, guys, hurry the fuck up.
we're not going to get to all 4 topics we had set aside.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's fine. That's fine.
So we can hold one back for next time. Maybe we'll know each topic needs a half hour. And then there's be another
Yeah,
half hour set aside for flopping our gums.
yeah. As one is necessary necessary to do. Here, I'll let you. You can choose. Where do you want to go from here?
Uh, Geez, that's a real tough one because I think both of the last ones are good. I actually will put out one last comment on the last topic though.
Yeah, yeah,
For a long time, I was really averse to most living card games because most of them play more like a board game.
yeah. That yeah.
If you've ever done any research on them, you'll see games like Vampire: The Eternal Struggle, or as it was originally
Yes.
called Jihad. That's a great name.
Yeah, yeah. I've only heard the vampire name. I didn't know it had something before that.
Yeah, yeah. Originally, when Richard Garfield made it, it was Jihad.
Ah, racism.
Oh, that was made in like 1995. I don't think anyone would
Yeah, it's
notice.
like yeah, that's the point. In the '90s, the shit you could get away with is just like there's blue enchantments that are hilarious.
Yeah,
Anyways,
yeah,
keep going,
and
keep going.
games like the Cyberpunk game. I forget what it's called. I'm sure Foyo can tell us in the comments. The Cyberpunk game that Richard Garfield made
Oh,
that ended up being a living card game made by someone else.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I know which one you're talking about.
Yeah.
I don't
So
recall the name of it.
yeah. So for the longest
Edge
So for the longest time, I was really, really averse to that playstyle because it wasn't how, in my mind, I wanted card games, how I wanted to enjoy them. It wasn't the experience I wanted from them. And a couple of months ago, a mate got, who's Bird, if you follow the Discord, he's the lead playtester for Hyperjuken now. He got me to try Marvel Champions, and that's this type of game. We do player versus the game quite a bit. You play together versus the game, and I've been rather enjoying it a lot more than I expected to. It's like, okay, I'll give it a shot. I'll be open. It's like, okay, I'm getting the swing of it. Okay, I actually enjoy this.
Absolutely.
And I don't really see it as being going in with an open mind. I see it more as, I guess, it's really hard to describe. It's more putting aside the idea that you might dislike it.
Yeah, yeah. I think a lot of people, and this is in general, but I think a lot of game players in particular close the door on opportunities they might enjoy, they might not,
Hmm.
but I think we're so I'll use another magic pun. We're
Netrunner,
so
there we go.
tribal. It is Blade Runner. Okay. Um, I think we're so tribal in
Yeah.
our card games
Oh, yeah,
for
I've noted
many
that
of
for
us,
years.
and I really for a long time I didn't understand the guys that played a new game every week, and now I don't necessarily like. I'm the type of person that I like to dig
Thoyo is
in.
that guy.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the thing. Is like there are people like Foyo that just he can play a new game every week, and his brain is giant because I I can't move that fast. And sometimes I do want to like dig in and like if right now for pre-modern I have one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight, nine tabs open of various decks and brews and whatever else. And so like when I like a game, I definitely like to dive in. But at the same time, I have an absolute blast. My buddy Kevin comes over once in a while, and we'll play test some Tenshoku, and then we're like, okay, I'm good on that for a little bit. Let's do something else. What do you want to play? And I was like, hey, why don't you try Hyperjukin? My buddy made this. And we sat down, we had the rules open, we had a blast. We played a couple, we did a best 2 out of 3 because we were like, do you want to play that again? He was like, yeah, that was fun. I could play another game. I think I could do better this time. And
That'll
that's
get you one
awesome. And
constructed, mate.
I have too much constructed in my head working on right now, but at some point you'll have to sell me on it. Maybe I'll come visit you down there. But like that's I love that even as is like LCGs like you know and I made Tenshoku kind of originally beta is not as much like obviously it has archetypes, but it's not as out of the box as maybe someone would like.
Mm.
But with like Gamma with Omega, if you've never played the game before, you can just put 40 of these cards together all in a day and you have a functional archetype. And I think that I was like you. I thought LCG meant basically board game that used cards. And I thought that's lame and I'm not into that. And I'm not a big fan of board games nowadays. Like I like them. I like children's board games that are quick. I don't particularly want to sit down and spend 2, 3 hours on one board game.
Just to pause you there, Marvel Champions, if you get the chance to play it, I don't know if you will up there, but I'd say it does play like a card game, but its biggest issue, well, it uses a lot of counters and that, but its biggest issue is it takes up a lot of space like a board game, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and well, that's the other thing. For those that don't know, I live in Japan. Space is very much a premium here, and like even for card events, you can't if you have a full American size playmat, that's not gonna work at most of the tables here.
No.
Like I don't know how it is in Australia, but like we have very minimal space, and I'm lucky that I have a nice table in my office that I can play games on, but it is gaming space is a premium here, and so you really don't have as many board game shops like you might have in the States. Like
Yeah.
there's very few, they're hard to find and there's not a lot of players for them. Card games obviously are much more popular here, but just I've over the last let's say 6 years of working on Tenshoku, I have become an absolute LCG advocate, and to me that is any any player should advocate for that style of game. And I know it's not financially as viable and
Yeah.
whatnot, but
I think the
hey,
big problem with that is more how many people that are actually interested in card games are interested in the game part of it.
yeah. And I meant to say this way like hours ago, but I saw a thing where for Pokemon, 80% are collectors.
Yeah,
20,
Shuckle mentioned that.
yeah. And I was just like, that's crazy. And whereas, and I would say this with a lot of certainty almost for a lot of LCG games, or at least ours in particular, I would say it's probably closer to 95 to 100% almost
A
is
hundred.
you're there to play.
No
Like,
one is buying
I,
Hyperjuken or Tenshoku to look at the pretty cards. I'm just saying it.
no, no. I mean, I look at them in a binder, but that's
Oh, I've got
I
a binder
know
too now.
I know like one or two people that ask for like a playset plus one so they can have one in a
Yeah,
binder. But like outside of that, I guess I've reached that point where like Magic is the game that will be worth money, so to speak.
yeah.
Now, I have Force of Will bindered up. I like looking at them. I like looking at casters. I like looking at all the games I've worked on. I think it's fun, but
My Force of
I
Will's in the
don't.
box.
Yeah, like I look at Magic cards, and Magic is the most complicated for me because I I see them as game pieces, but I understand there is not child's play amounts of money
Yeah.
inside those play pieces. And I advocate for the people that just want to play proxy 100%.
Oh yeah,
If
yeah. And you're not the first
and
person I've heard say that. There was this Magic player that said, I forget who he was. Comments might know. Said that if you're playing at the kitchen table, do not buy cards. Go to the printer.
yep. And and now like for me personally, like as an old Magic player, and I can say this with kind of certainty, old Magic players, if you kept your cards, you absolutely have made out like a bandit.
Yeah,
You've made out better than the stock market. You've made out better than pretty much any investment vehicle. And so for me, there is very, like, a very tangible financial aspect to the game that I'm happy to have benefited from. But they are still, and this is true for just to me,
it's true for Pokemon
I
too
want to play.
as well now.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. That's like, but to me, it's just they're still game pieces, and I want to play. And I've proxied my own cards just because they're so expensive
Yeah,
now
that's
that
actually something I was going to ask you because I'm going to do the same. I'm one of my favorite decks back in those good old days was a deck called Meta Knights. It's Metagross Delta Species and Dragonite Delta Species. Both those cards are worth
oh
a pretty penny now. And I'm
yeah,
just gonna go, you know what? I don't want to bring my old ones out. I sure as hell do not want to spend large amounts of money to finish off playsets if I need them, which I don't, but if I did, I'm just gonna print the entire deck out.
that's well, and that's the other like I am still in the point where I don't mind buying the expensive cards. To me, like a there's a part of me that I like having the real ones and the expensive ones, and it feels nice, but at the same time, like I I'm in a life position where that's a viable option
Mm.
and I can air quotes invest and play at the same time. But like I went to a pre-modern event like I mentioned a week or two ago.
We'll save the
I
last
did
two
not
topics for next time, okay?
yeah. I did not bring on purpose a deck that plays with like Mox Diamonds, and these are cards that are like $600-700 a piece. And it's just I don't know these people yet. I'm not gonna bring this deck. And now I've met them. They're wonderful, nice guys. I would have no issues with them. Beautiful people. So I'm just like, okay. Like if I want to play the big scary decks, then sure. Even like for Legacy, I remember having like a heart attack with some of the people like either new players or like standard players that would shuffle my deck, and I'm like, "Hey, homie, that's a couple thousand or $20,000 you're shuffling there. Like, we're not playing riffle shuffle the game here.
Oh yeah, at that point, I'm
And
not touching your deck, mate. I do not want that lingering over my head.
like I've been to SCG Opens, like legacy events where dudes' decks are, and even here in Japan, there are $100,000 plus decks, and like obviously you go into these events kind of thinking you're with like-minded people, but like a 16-year-old that rolls up with his burn deck and it's barely sleeved and penny sleeves, it's not. I hope it doesn't come off elitist when you're just like, I'm gonna ask the judge to shuffle the deck because no offense, but like your hands are dirty and gross, and I can see that you don't take care of your cards, and it's not worth it. And I've backed away from tournament magic now, so I've kind of removed a lot of the expensive cards. For I liked making proxies, so I made like foil dual lands and stuff. But that I totally get.
Okay, I got a,
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say I got a couple of funny stories about that.
Okay, go.
One early when I was playing Pokemon, uh, the thing that got me to really start paying attention to wash my hands before I touch my cards was mate at the time complained your cards smell like dogs.
Oh, yeah, because you always have your pets with you. Yeah.
Yeah, and if
I,
now I'm like, no, whoever's next to me, you have to go away. I've washed my hands. I want to touch my cards. Then I'll play with you. Uh,
I now that you say that, I have a very specific memory of Pokemon tournament in the 90s. There was a guy, penny sleeves had become a thing. I don't know if everyone was, not really. A lot of the people were young that were playing, but I remember one of the guys that was often like me and him were top two, top three. Uh, he had penny sleeves, and I hope this isn't too stereotypical, but he had the long fingernails. There was
oh,
dirt under the nails,
oh,
and the card flipping wasn't as bad as it is now, where like people freaking do breakdancing with the cards in their hand, but still there was a lot of movement, and I just remember like the sleeves were filthy,
oh,
and I hated that. And I've always I'm not like a clean freak, but I like my nails short. I don't like any like dirt under my nails, anything like that. I like clean hands,
yeah.
and I triple sleeve my legacy decks, etc. But to see like it was the 90s, and I was just like, no, that is gross. I, when I play games, I kind of get in the zone a little bit, so I tend not to look at their face as much as like board state and
Yeah.
maybe like body posture to kind of read what's going on. But that I just remember like bothering me so much to this is what 25 years later basically.
Yeah.
I still remember that was like the okay, we are cleaning and none of this
Yeah,
nonsense.
that reminds me of my second one. Vanguard at the time was being done at a local pop culture store near me,
Okay.
and I was paired up with this guy, and you could see literal dirt all over him. And I'm like, just thinking to myself, dude, did you just literally come from some type of job where you're digging ditches? It was gross. And it's like,
And
what's
I
the one from Peanuts, Snoopy? You know the one
yeah,
that,
that's exactly who I was thinking of.
yeah,
God, what is his name? Not Schrodinger.
Pigsty, I
Oh
think.
my God. Pixar.
Pigpen.
Yes.
Pigpen.
Pigpen. Pigpen.
Yeah, it's funny because I got my real Snoopy next to me because my the pup that's sitting next to me, his name is Snoopy because he's got the same markings as him.
Oh, cute. So jealous. Yeah, like man, and that is to say, like again, this is I don't want to. I've had this interaction specifically, and I'm not the social justice police or anything like that, but it's not that like the blue collar jobs or anything shouldn't play games. I'm not saying
No,
that, and I'm not. anything like. I've had a buddy who he worked at a machining shop, and he was greasy as shit, and it was like burned into his skin. But like he knew that too, and he's aware of it. He had his nails kept good, and like he had sleeves, and he knew how to shuffle a deck and not rip your cards in half. And
It doesn't
it's more
take that
so
much effort to go wash your hands, really.
no, really, and that like no one's gonna give you shit if like it's kind of the same thing with like I feel like in the not even mid, the early 2000s, gamers, not even gamers, card gamers in particular, were still of the era of maybe the classic otaku. And by that, I mean kind of the, again, I'm not trying to attack anybody, just what it is like overweight, socially awkward, kind of inappropriate comments, jokes, etc. Like that was the atmosphere. And I'm totally fine to bro it out and have a good time, but there's a certain amount of personal hygiene that I think is just generally required to go outside that was sometimes not respected, and that made it sometimes rough. Like when I said I'm a Magic player, I think it had some negative connotation
Yeah.
for a long time, and it's only in probably the last 10 years and less than that honestly
Oh, your
where
nose is Snoopy, by the way. Man of
where
good
that's
culture
become
there.
classy over here. Like I think that kind of cleanliness has spread into the sphere, and I think also just and again time has changed. There's way more women in the sphere now, and that's very cool. Like in Force of Will, I remember there was some very prominent females that played the game and did
Stephanie,
well,
for a
and I was
start.
Stephanie was amazing. She was my right hand man when I was at the company, the head judge for the world. But even like there was the artist. Oh God, she's gonna kill me. Taylor, who I asked for commissions for the world event for tokens, and then you had players. What was her name? Yumi, a Japanese girl. She was a university student at the time, but she was a world caliber player, and all Steph was as well. Steph was multi talented, but and still is, but just that the visual appearance of them at the highest level, I think, really expanded in the 2010s, and I think that's awesome. Like I I definitely know that they existed prior to that, but it oftentimes was not the case that you saw them. And I see it now even in Smash Brothers. I kind of love it in competitive games, or they're all competitive, but in fighting games to see now like top eights where you have multiple ladies playing, and they don't need any like handicap or anything. They're whooping ass just as much as the next guy. And I think it goes kind of hand in hand with games have become much more socially acceptable. You're around my age, and I think we saw in the 90s and obviously the 80s that like games were not for everyone, and you would be heckled, bullied, made fun of,
Yeah.
etc. if those hobbies were known that you participated in.
Yeah.
The same with video games, the same with knowing how to use a computer. Like, all of those things were very taboo and very, like, oh, you're kind of weird if you're into that stuff. And it makes me so happy nowadays when I see a young boyfriend girlfriend couple playing video games together on the train or something. Like, if they're in high school or university students, like, the joy that it brings me that they can have that kind of relationship and play games together is so cool. I just think that's the greatest thing in the world, and I'm bummed that that didn't happen in the frequency that it could have in our younger years when we were teenagers, etc.
I do think that demographics have a lot to play there too, well, not demographics, the IP and what demographics it appeals to, I should say. I remember
Yeah.
in Pokemon back in the early 2000s, in the late 90s, women were far more prominent in that, and I should say girls as well, than other games. And I do believe that part of the IP has a big factor to play in that. I remember my Pokemon League at the time, back when I was competitive running. Another girl named Stephanie, about my age, running it. Small world thing. One of my best friends playing Pokemon at the time, she was a woman, a little bit older than me. I think she's close to your age.
Okay.
That was not unheard of in Pokemon, and it was in other games. The more anime inspired it was at the time, it seemed to get more of that female attention, especially if it
That's true.
wasn't shonen based.
Yeah, I was just gonna say my ex of 10 years, when even when we started dating, uh, this is early 2000s. Like she was into the Inuyasha. She like all of the kind of not boys love, but
Yeah,
a little bit more of the anime of the what was it fruit baskets or some
yeah,
of that kind of stuff. Like there was definitely still like, and that's why I say it it existed for sure, and I think it in the right games, and that was the other thing. It's just there wasn't as many games back then. Like the '90s, the kind of the end of the '90s, kind of everyone gave up, so to speak. I feel like a lot of the indie stuff, we're kind of in a renaissance again. But like, I feel like in the early '90s, after Magic blew up, everyone was making games. Everyone was making fun of Magic. It was kind of a prime time. Late '90s, it started to die off. Pokemon blew up.
yeah.
Yu-Gi-Oh came out, and then there was kind of a dead period where people weren't really trying to make new games for a while in the mid 2000s. I think it was kind of just you were part of the establishment of one of the big games, or you really weren't probably playing the games. And then some of the more anime games came out, and Pokemon has always had obviously a very gender neutral like appreciation, especially
Yeah,
when they started having, how was it, May? Is that the Gen 3 girl
yeah.
in the games and stuff? And like, and obviously they're cute and whatnot too, but just even Pokemon's gotta be the closest to a 50-50 you'll get anywhere.
Oh yeah,
But just they, there's so many games now. There's a game for everybody. Like, what do you like? There's probably a game for it or a fan game for it, and so it's much more accessible. It's much more, or much less taboo, and like I love it. I'm so happy that games have entered that kind of cultural normalcy that we see now, and that there's not like jock culture has almost kind of switched places almost
mm.
where now that's kind of the and like I realized the other day I'm like I haven't watched a football game or a basketball game in forever, and like I used to watch my brother liked it, and so I used to just kind of idolize my brother and I'd do whatever with him, and so I knew all the like basketball players of the '90s and early 2000s, but since I've kind of moved away from America, I have no clue. Like that entire culture just
Aren't they
has
big on
ceased.
baseball up there though?
Yes, the baseball people are intense. Like I've had university age students that will have season passes and they'll show me like their schedule and they'll be like, "Oh, Jeff, I'm so busy this week." I'm like, "What do you got? Part-time job?" And they're like, "Oh no, my team has 4 games this week and I have to go to all of them." And like baseball is intensity here, and it's equally male and female.
Mm.
I get a kick out of it. You get these cute little tiny 5 foot girls, and they'll be like, "Yeah, I have a season pass to the Giants baseball team, and I go to 200 plus games a year." I'm like, "Oh my god!" I'm happy that like all passions now are kind of like I had a girl in my class this last fall, or excuse me, spring. She loved Pokemon. She came in every day with Pokemon earrings and a different thing, and she's proud of it. And obviously, the students love when they find out their teacher's a big nerd. So like, they kind of amp it up a little bit. But like, I always encourage them. I'm like, guys, if you like something, be proud of it. Don't keep it in. I say this to my buddies: smoke pot. I don't know if pot's legal in Australia. It's not here, but I used to tell people like, don't be ashamed of what it is you like or you do. I used to like, I don't care if you go get high. I don't give a shit. Like, just be honest about it. Like, be proud of what it is that you love and you do. You make games. We make games. Be proud of that. Tell people about it. And part of that is in being proud of it. Take ownership of it. Be good at it. The thing that kind of bugs me sometimes, and tell me what you feel about this, but when people, I don't understand, I guess, and I struggle. So this isn't me being correct. It's just me not understanding. I don't do well with doing something casually. I feel like if you do something, be good at it. Get into it. Be invested in it. It's okay to be casual, absolutely. I don't find it as rewarding as whatever my hobbies are to get into it, sink my teeth into it. So like when people say like I'm a casual gamer and they like all these AAA games and I'm just like to me there's nothing to sink my teeth into here. It's a 20, 30-hour story that was produced basically by some AI drone and if not AI then just an unoriginal board. Hey, this game did well. Let's make a version of that. And there's nothing to sink my teeth into, and I that to me is not satisfying. How do you feel about that?
Uh, I think it really depends on whether it's if we're talking strictly hobbies. Yeah, if I really, I'm not one to take things casually myself. I think it's more casual for me is more is it required for me to do? It's like, do I need to do it? Do I? And I don't really want to. Yeah, I'm probably not going to put in the effort. If I want to do it, and it's fun and I like it, I'm going to spend so much more energy chucking it into it.
It's funny you say that, and now I just quick side note. I had a conversation with my wife the other day. We said one of the things we noticed maybe about a high class or high quality person in general is the ability to do something you don't want to do because you know either it's good for you, you need to do it for one reason or another, or it's just a necessity.
Hmm.
And the logic being that you get to a certain point in life, you're going to have to do stuff you don't want to do in some facet. And you have to be able to kind of turn the switch off of it's a choice and just I have to do it. I'm gonna do it. The end. It's not a question in your head kind of thing.
Get it done.
And yeah, exactly. What was the old commercial like? Get her done or whatever. But yeah, so now not only have we had a excellent conversation, I now know that you are a high class individual.
Anyway, I think with
But
that we have to leave off because I've got things to do, and I'm sure you do
yeah,
too. Because it's
yes.
3 up there, isn't it?
1 o'clock right now.
Oh,
But I we had a nice 2 hour chat. We'll definitely do more of these.
yeah.
I should appreciate. Yeah, I'll let you do the outro. But just as a side note, thank you everyone for listening. If you don't know who I am,
Yeah, I thought it was actually a lot more enjoyable than I expected. I didn't feel nervous or anything. Again, this is my first time. I don't know if you've done it with any of the old Force of Will YouTubers.
a couple times, but not to such an enjoyable, just free, open topic kind of thing. So this was really nice.
So
We at least had a conversation.
I don't know if we'll be doing it next week. I've got actually other people in my Discord that are like, I would like to do an episode too.
Hey, that's cool.
Yeah, so
Like,
I think at this point it might be a case of booking people in.
hey, I'm happy to show up whenever, and like this to me is less so about the production and more so talking with a friend and doing it live so we can have a nice chat and other people can sit in and join with us as well.
Yeah. Hope everyone enjoyed it. Just a note, this hopefully will go up. I didn't click record, but I'm hoping YouTube saves it. Otherwise, oh boy, that's not fun. Every topic will likely go up individually, though. I don't think we quite clearly cut each topic. We
Yeah,
just kind
yeah,
of
yeah.
meandered around a bit in different things.
No problem, man. I hope people enjoyed.
Same.
Uh, let's do this again sometime. If anyone has any topics they would like to kind of discuss as a side note in the comments, leave that there. We'll take a look. If not, we have lots of questions we didn't even get to that we had planned on talking about, so we got
Yeah,
more
because
to
we only
go
got to
there.
half of them.
Yeah. So, anyways, absolute pleasure, man. Take care of
Same.
yourself.
You
Talk
too.
more soon.
See you,
Bye.
everyone.